My personal view is that the Bitcoin ecosystem is much better off just migrating to Runes.
Leo, I am so excited to have you here. What a special treat for the Bitcoin Rails podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Isabel, very honored to be on the show. I'm very happy that we're doing this and excited to hopefully dig into a bunch of really fun stuff.
I'm super excited. So, I mean, obviously you have, of course, been at the top of my list of people to chat with since I very started the pod, but I was waiting for the perfect moment. And I think we found the perfect moment. So yeah, excited to dive into various fun topics, Bitcoin ecosystem related. For folks who might be watching who, are not immediately in the Bitcoin native assets space or are in the Bitcoin native asset space, but somehow managed to miss you, which I highly doubt, but just in case, thought we'd share a little bit about kind of your background in the space, sort of position you in the space a little bit before getting started with this interview. You've been in Ordinal since day one, started the Ordinal Show, easily sort of the most tuned into kind of media operation in Ordinals. And then we were actually just sharing off camera. The last time I spoke to you was before the launch of Runestone, which was, I believe, the largest market cap pre-Rune collection that ever existed. And then, of course, that eventually turned into Dog, which is now the largest cap, highest volume Rune coin in existence. Am I summarizing that accurately about you?
Yeah, correct. I started on Bitcoin and then ended up venturing into Ethereum for a very long time. So I was Bitcoin maxi to ETH maxi, and now I'm back to Bitcoin maxi and just having fun running experiments, doing crazy stuff here, trying to make Bitcoin exciting and fun, really. I think Bitcoin got this kind of rep of being boring and slow. I actually think Bitcoin's super badass. It's incredibly fun. There's a lot of reasons why people should care about it. Maybe they're degens over in other ecosystems on other chains. I think they should care about Bitcoin. And I think Dog, Runestone, pretty much everything I'm doing is an attempt to get people to start using Bitcoin for things other than just maybe store of value, which obviously everybody kind of knows it's very good at that. There's actually other things that you could do on Bitcoin, and we're kind of just, starting to figure out what that is.
Yeah, that's sort of certainly going to be one of the things on our list is I'd like to hear sort of your, ultimate defense of Bitcoin tokens in particular, but we can also speak about ordinals as well. Before we get into that, I also just want to sort of ground the conversation. So last week I put out a slightly spicy interview with Beezy, who is a former analyst at Galaxy, very pro ordinals dude and prolific analyst in the space. And he was sort of very critical of the Runes launch and its sort of impact on Ordinal. So I definitely want to get into that as well. I think we're going to have fun chatting about all of the above. Out of curiosity, since you brought it up, did you go to Ethereum because you wanted to do all of this new experimentation? How did the trajectory going from being Bitcoin maxi to Ethereum and then into the Bitcoin native asset space go for you?
So I was sort of casual Bitcoin maxi, more I just held Bitcoin. So I had very big bag bias, and I bought it first in 2014. So what am I going to buy? Litecoin? Probably not, right? I'm going to buy Bitcoin. So I really, casually was just hey, I'm going to hold Bitcoin. Hopefully it goes up in value, very much from a speculative nature. And then started to learn more about it and just kind of slowly go down the rabbit hole. I was a dev. I was not full-time into crypto or anything like that. This was just very much just kind of a side investment I made. But when Ethereum came out, I was screw this. This is competition for Bitcoin. I don't like Ethereum. And then my friend bought, who had bought Ethereum at $10. He had been hounding me about Ethereum. So I finally started to check it out a little bit. And the idea of a smart contract is pretty cool, right? It's it's a pretty natural continuation of blockchain tech, right? To be able to just do more computations on the chain. And yeah, as a dev, I was this is actually kind of neat. And there's a lot of fun experiments going on. So I played CryptoKitties, messed around with all of these kind of early stuff, watched all of the ICO stuff, again, fairly casually. I wasn't full-time in the space or anything. But then, ended up doing a little bit of work in crypto, which is not, I don't tie that to my Leonidas self. I didn't launch any coins or anything like that, but just worked for just a company in the space back in 2017. Not a company that ever launched a coin or anything. So for all my haters, you're not going to get some sort of backstory like that here. But I did get to work in crypto a little bit. Really, 2021, like very fully embraced NFTs and just specifically focused on NFTs. That ended up taking me back to Bitcoin somehow through meeting Casey.
Okay. Did you, I mean, how did you get into Ordinals? Like, how did the Ordinal, I mean, did you just sort of see it happening from afar and just immediately dive in? Again, you were incredibly early. I think the Ordinal Show, I think Travers told me that the Ordinal Show started at the end of February 2023. And I think the first inscription ever was made in January, if I'm not mistaken. Is that accurate to your timeline?
Yeah, that's accurate. So I had been studying and researching the history of NFTs. It kind of gets made fun of, but there was a group of us called NFT archaeologists, and we would literally, like, I was very much a researcher. Nobody followed me. I was just a researcher, and I went and I was looking for interesting old smart contracts, NFTs on any blockchain, really. That eventually led me to counterparty assets on Bitcoin. So I own Rare Pepe, Spells of Genesis cards because of that. So already had this sort of like NFTs on Bitcoin thing planted in my head just from owning those assets and studying those assets. But spent a ton of time. Like I've probably looked through like 2018 ERC 721 contracts more than about anybody. Like there's maybe like a couple of people who maybe have looked at a similar amount, but spent a lot of time researching. I actually still have some like really interesting smart contracts back there that I found that like still nobody's found. But fast forward a little bit. Casey comes to the NFT archaeology crowd because he's like, guys, I think really? Yes. Casey's like,
I did not know this.
Yeah. So Casey, this is the summer before Ordinals came out. He thinks that he has found the oldest NFTs. So he's kind of pitching us on this idea of potentially these are interesting old collectibles. He calls them Ordinals, which are old satoshis that you can collect. And, you know, I was like, from a provenance perspective, I'm not sure this is not going to fit like the strict criteria necessarily of an on-chain NFT, from the sense that a lot of the collectors that currently are collecting historical NFTs would value it. But I think what you come up with is really cool. And I do think there is collectability to it. So ended up, you know, I messaged with Casey a little bit, ended up doing an interview with my friend Adam and Jake, with Casey on a Twitter space a few months before Ordinals came out. Just found the guy like really smart and pretty crazy idea. We were just like, we hear a lot of stuff. This was by far one of the crazier things that we've kind of heard somebody kind of share. And we just thought it was cool. And we speculated on what kind of sats people might want to collect. You know, that was pretty much it. Then Casey messages me in January. Hey, I just dropped Ordinals. I checked the website. There's like 25 inscriptions. I should have just like instantly started subscribing. I didn't, of course, right? But a few, you know, there's a few hundred inscriptions get done, and then it's like kind of coming back on my radar again. I see Udi and them do their huge 4 mega, and then it's like everything kind of catches fire, and I just do essentially a full pivot. I'm like, you know, it's a pretty boring bear market. A lot of the stuff on ETH I have issues with. We don't really need to get into that on the podcast today, but a lot of the problematic aspects of Ethereum NFTs Casey was pointing out, and I, from an ethos perspective, like fully agreed with him on a lot of this, and then was just like, I'm going to full pivot to Bitcoin Ordinals. Like, this is really cool. This is one of the more interesting things that's happened in this bear market. And yeah, like we had this vision for Web3 on Bitcoin that, I mean, it's pretty crazy. It's, you know, still not, you know, as massive as I think it will be, but we've come a very long way since then. I, obviously you being there as well, realize the space has grown a lot. It's changed quite a bit.
I'm so curious, and I don't think we should, to your point, spend too much time talking about, you know, the benefits of Ordinals over, or the advantages of Ordinals over Ethereum NFTs. But I am curious if there's like one or two kind of points that Casey had made that sort of resonated with you most. Before we get into that, though, I have to ask, was there a big market for historical NFTs on Ethereum. Like, what was the vibe around historical NFTs on Ethereum? Like, what was the NFT archaeology crowd like? Like, how did that resonate as a narrative in Ethereum?
So I think the whole like history of NFTs is fascinating because like people do think about them as collectibles. So it kind of makes sense, like, you know, the scarcity of a 1975 baseball card for, you know, some super famous baseball player, right? There's only, you know, a couple hundred of them. Like that's going to be very valuable. It's a relationship between like, yeah, it's cool that it's early and it's like this neat experiment. So there's like just kind of a novelty to that. But there's also a scarcity because of time. You literally cannot go back to 2017 and create any more ERC 721 contracts. You cannot make another CryptoPunks from 2017. You can look at every smart contract from Ethereum in 2017, and anybody can objectively come to the conclusion that like CryptoPunks is like pretty badass, right? This is a pretty cool NFT collection compared to everything else happening at the time. And in 2021, it was like, okay, well, you know, there's literally 1 million ERC 721 contracts released during this year. People can create infinite more of them. There's no scarcity there. So I think a lot of this it's fundamentally just like storing value, scarcity. The historical NFT lens is a great way to have that scarcity. And I think it holds up pretty well. Like the 2017 smart contracts that have NFTs in them, they're pretty valuable, still pretty valuable. Obviously CryptoPunks really outshining there, but there's only about 20 of them. And collectors still very much do care about them, and they hold value a lot more than the 2021 contracts, I'll basically say. As far as the things that Casey was saying that really resonated with me, I had spent just like thousands of hours looking at trying to like do research, trying to find old NFT collections, early experiments that had non-fungible tokens in them, right? Through that, I had found a lot of projects where you can own the token, but you don't know what the art looks like. And this is not like this was like we got unlucky with this one. This was like almost all of the 2018 smart contracts had tokens where like you can buy this like, you know, flower. It's like a tulip. There's like 100 of them. You can own a token called like tulip number 7, but you have no idea what the tulip looks like. And I had that experience over and over and over again. Like spent way too much time with this, trying to go back and find images and put together pieces of some of these old projects.
And just for clarity, again, I'm going to sound like a dumb maxi here, but like, is that because the images weren't available when you were minting? Like the minting experience is different where you mint and then you get the image? Or was this because the images were, you know, on centralized servers, not actually, you know, really like on chain? Like explain this a little bit more for me.
Yeah, so the way the ERC 721 standard works is that the token lives on Ethereum, but the actual artwork itself, there's a pointer to it, and it could exist anywhere. It could exist in a centralized server. It could exist in an IPFS distributed type network, but very, very rarely. There are a few examples of early on-chain art on Ethereum, but the vast majority of NFTs were stored in centralized servers. So there was a suite of probably a dozen of these sort of like marketplaces or launch pads or art platforms for NFTs in 2018 and 2019 that they just went out of business before the bull market came back, and they shut down. The art's basically gone forever. I don't know where it is. Nobody's able to find it. You got to build in such
servers just like clunked out, basically. Like you were just completely dependent on centralized. That was the core issue that you're referencing. Is you're completely the art living on a
they were not storing the artwork, the files, in a way that had any strong resilience. So a single company shutting down their servers means the art's gone forever. That's not good. And I actually watched it happen because, I'm going back and finding all of these. People in 2021 didn't care about this. They now start to care about it when those 2021 companies are shutting down and they're, going to a website and they don't see their image anymore. But that issue was like very much, it was not like a little thing. It was something that like the majority of NFTs had, and only a few years had passed and the NFT art is disappearing, right? This is not good. If we actually take seriously, like you're spending $10,000 on this piece of art, it should probably last for more than 3 years. Like the whole kind of argument and pitch that people are making is that this stuff is like permanent. And I'm having a very different experience with the NFT collecting that I'm doing on Ethereum. Casey has a very great solution to this. He's like, pay a lot of money to inscribe it into Bitcoin. You won't have this issue. Yeah, it's going to cost a lot of money, but at least the thing will be around in 100 years. I was like, yeah, okay, this guy gets it. Like, this is definitely the path forward. I'm never spending $100,000 on an NFT again that somebody can like change the image, right? This is very bad. So that, and then also there was this whole thing, and again, we don't have to go down the rabbit hole too much here, but there was this giant, pretty much the biggest thing going on during the bear market in Ethereum was a kind of war, culture war around royalties on Ethereum and whether they're going to be enforced or not. They were not enforced at a smart contract level. The marketplaces had been enforcing them in 2021. Things had just grown so fast that people were fine paying a 10% royalty. People, the market got more efficient over time, and like traders did not want to pay 10% kind of taxes every time they trade an NFT on Ethereum, right? So it's just the market being efficient. And I kind of saw this thing emerge where it would be like all of the people who were like quote unquote bad actors not paying this 10% fee every time they want to trade an NFT. They were actually, they were the winners because they just got to trade and not pay this huge cut. And then everyone else who was paying it, you're kind of the loser because you have to pay this huge fee. And it created this very weird sort of social dynamic where it's like, it's very not good to not pay the royalty, yet nobody's paying them. And then it turned into a situation where, it was like 95% of NFT trades are no longer paying royalties. So the optional kind of royalties failed. And then this is the issue that I have. A group of people at the largest exchanges, we're talking OpenSea, bunch of different places, basically said, we have a solution. We're going to create a new standard for NFTs on Ethereum where we have a middleman sort of multi-sig that tells people where they can and can't trade their NFTs.
Ooh.
And I was like, look, guys, I'm all for like, if you could enforce royalties and people want to opt into that system, that's great. But you do not get to like freeze my NFT if you don't like something. You don't get to tell me what to do. The entire point of all of this is that Satoshi gave us Bitcoin so that we can hold our asset without a middleman. And you guys are recreating the system that we're trying to escape. And this was all a bunch of like pro artist virtue signaling going on and completely missing the entire point of why we're here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, this is no longer my people. This was happening at the exact same time Casey was like writing, the README for Ordinals, which he was like, screw royalties. So I was all of the timing lined up, and I'm like, this guy Casey gets it. On-chain art, don't have a middleman holding the NFT for you. Like, this is insane. I want to hold the art that I own. And yeah, it seems like a lot of people also resonated with that, and Ordinals kind of caught on.
So sounds like it wasn't just Ordinals. You were a Casey fan, right? Like you kind of believed in Casey as like as a thinker, as a developer in the space. I mean, is that accurate?
I'll be honest. I thought Casey was a little bit crazy with the Ordinal stuff, with like the stat tracking. When the inscriptions came out, I was like, okay, I can kind of see how everyone's going to like this because it's the NFT form factor that they're looking for. I had found the sats really cool, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend like when I interviewed Casey and talked to him that I was like, this is the future of Bitcoin. Like, I did not see that. I thought it was really cool. I thought there might be a market around it that was very niche. It grew much, much bigger than I had ever imagined. And my respect for Casey is kind of grown over time.
I was not planning on bringing up this next question, but it's come to mind as we're talking about the sort of distinction between Satoshis and inscriptions. Do you have a point of view about the market viability of rare Satoshis?
Yeah, look, I think you basically, for all of these assets on Bitcoin, you have this problem of like, people need to click a button to buy it very easily. And it doesn't matter how like cool the narrative is, right? If you can't buy it. And I actually experienced the same thing with the Bitcoin NFTs from Counterparty. People need to be able to easily click a button and buy something. And I think rare sats suffer from a little bit of an issue where the user experience, it's drastically better. And there's devs like Query who have made a lot of strides there. But we'll just create the example of uncommon sats, right? So the uncommon sat, I think it actually does have a pretty badass narrative. I think it needs to be listed on Binance and sit next to Dogecoin so that people can buy it spot on Binance. It's just a digital asset like other digital assets. it needs to be packaged in a form factor such that people can click a button to buy it. And if people have to do anything more than that, the asset class is going to be kind of capped on how valuable it can become. So to mature, you need to make it very, very easy to buy things the same way that, BlackRock has made it easy for people to buy Bitcoin.
Well, it's very interesting that you mentioned UX, because we're going to have like a whole section of this interview where we get into UX challenges for Bitcoin native assets. So just you wait. But before we kind of get into that level of depth and granularity, pushing the story forward, tell me about your launch into Runes, right? I mean, you really sort of attacked Runes right from the beginning, right? You launched again, I think at one point, if not sort of at the beginning of the happening, Runestones was the largest market cap, largest, greatest volume, pre-Rune collection. How did that happen? Like, tell me the story of Runes from your perspective as the creator of both Runestones and then later Dog.
Yeah, look, this feels like a lifetime ago, even though I know it's just a year ago. Runestone started as an experiment of, okay, like let's do it on Runes. This Runes thing's really cool, but like Runestone was not created just because Runes was cool. Runestone was an experiment to see if you create, like, I'm pretty tuned into like what's happening on Solana and Ethereum, these other chains, and I'm seeing them like embrace this kind of rampant culture of speculation, not really having any values. Like if you ask a Bitcoiner and you're like, hey, this chain had a 50% pre-mine, is that fair to you? The Bitcoiners are all going to have the same answer. No, we don't like that. Like, this is not an ideal way to start a blockchain. And I generally like think I agree mostly with the sentiment. And I'm like, okay, they're doing meme coins on these other chains now, and they're having 80% pre-mines. The only possible argument for a pre-mine is that you need to do something. These are meme coins and NFTs. Why would you need to have 80% for yourself? You're not doing anything. They're non-utility assets. So I was like, these ecosystems are going to absolutely just crash and burn with this sort of no rules, no self-policing free market. Like a free market has to self-police itself, right? So I'm like, let's do an experiment over here on Bitcoin where we try to do the exact opposite of like an insider traded Solana pump and dump, okay? And it's going to be in the form of Runestone, which will be a pre-Rune that becomes a meme coin on Bitcoin. And the entire experiment was like, I wasn't planning on doing this, and let's just try it and see what happens. I'm not going to get a team allocation. It's airdrop for free. Let's make it a volunteer initiative. Let's try to, come together as an ecosystem as Ordinals and make as fair of a distribution as possible. Like, with the thesis, by the way, not that it's just like, hey, this is the right thing to do, but with the thesis that this is actually what the market wants. This is bullish for a coin when you don't, screw over the people who bought it or something, right? Like, this is like, I would assume that the theory was people buying an asset, if they feel like it's rigged by a bunch of insiders, they're either not going to buy it or they're not going to feel very strong about it. And there's not going to be a real community that gets built up there. It's not going to become very valuable. But if you try to copy what Satoshi did with Bitcoin and have this decentralized ethos where there is no team allocation, Satoshi is not paying for centralized exchange listings, Satoshi is not hiring market makers, anybody can use the Bitcoin logo and name for anything, it's kind of owned by everyone. Let's make a meme coin that looks like that and make sure that it has a fair start similar to how Bitcoin did. And we just talked in a Discord. I opened a Discord, the Ordinals ecosystem, hundreds of thousands of messages, having lots of debates around how this should be airdropped. Ultimately came up with an algorithm, had a bunch of, devs volunteer to sort of verify this algorithm, published it open source. And then we, raised some money, which was just like, hey, we got to pay these on-chain fees. At the time, if you remember, we did not have an empty mem pool. We spent, a lot of money, about $1 million to do Dog and Runestone airdrops. And ultimately, like, people came together and pitched in Bitcoin, and then we did this airdrop, and yeah, community formed, and basically everything that I could have ever hoped for has happened, except for maybe some centralized exchange listings. But I'm so proud of the community, honored to be part of the Dog Army. And I think there's something sustainable and very special here. And we're just going to continue to tell the story of Dog. It's a meme coin on Bitcoin. It had a fair launch. We're going to continue to tell that story. So that's pretty much a very high level summary of what happened. And obviously there's a lot of details in there. Like, yes, Runestone flipping Bored Ape Yacht Club by market cap. Like, that was pretty amazing, right? There's a lot of cool moments. But in summary, I think it's not about the meme coin. It's not about the picture of the dog. It's about a group of people on the internet who kind of all have this shared belief in something. And I think a lot of the people in crypto are tired of getting rugged. And they'll come to Dog and they'll say, yeah, like, this is how a meme coin should be created. This I can support. This I can tweet about and not feel like a piece of shit, basically. And then there's a lot of people that also really like Bitcoin. And Dog is a meme coin on Bitcoin. And those two things make Bitcoin's number one meme coin. Dog, like, hopefully valuable to a lot of people.
So I very much appreciate this sort of energy of this being an experiment, this being an exploration. Obviously, I also want to note RSIC, I believe, came out before Runestones. To what extent were you inspired by RSIC, and sort of how would you describe the differences between Runestones and RSIC as a project?
I was just, I use Ord.io pretty heavily, my company's explorer for Ordinals. And I saw these RSIC inscriptions and kind of like messages show up. And I thought it was like, okay, this is really interesting. I specifically really like the game aspect. I love like on-chain fun games like this. And, I think the idea of a pre-rune, there was actually a company that had kind of been doing the pre-rune thing since December. And I was like, okay, that company's doing pre-rune, RSIC's doing pre-rune. I think it actually makes a lot of sense. Catalyze the community before runes come out, so that when runes do come out, there's already a community there ready. And I think it worked pretty well. Like, a lot of the valuable runes today actually were pre-runes. Like Pups did this. Most of them. Well, so I think the model made a lot of sense. And yeah, very much saw the two sort of pre-rune projects. There were only two at the time. And, very much was like, I think this model makes a lot of sense. And was inspired by just the idea of like, hey, we can do the token before runes come out. This makes a lot of sense. So for the specific aspect of like the pre-rune, like, those two projects definitely deserve some credit. Well,
that's I think that's well put. And I will say, to your credit, you have done an incredible job at continuing to engage the community after runes launched, and after what has been, I would say, like a challenging 10 months for runes and the Bitcoin native assets ecosystems broadly, which we're also going to chat about. How has the last 10 months been for you? I have to ask, right? So the halving came, lots of anticipation, Runestones absolutely crushing as a pre-rune, major expectations. You have done very well on a relative basis, right? I mean, Dog is certainly number one rune by many metrics. But the markets broadly for runes have really suffered since the halving. Are you kind of enjoying your number one status on a relative basis, or are you feeling the pain of the market in the past 10 months?
So obviously I want Dog to succeed. I also very much want Bitcoin to succeed. I very much want this ecosystem to succeed. I think this ecosystem will continue to evolve over time. In 5 years, it may look very different than it looks today. I think the market comes in these sort of like hype and then fear, waves of attention. And we had, a huge wave of attention about a year ago, right? In the spring of 2024. And probably a lot of these assets were maybe overvalued looking back, right? We maybe our infrastructure wasn't there yet to support the value of these assets that we need. And the builders needed to kind of have some time to do a lot more building and solve a bunch of these user experience problems. And I think that's been happening. I do think from a morale perspective, it's really, really shitty to watch a lot of the assets that you hold go down 90, 95%, right? We're talking like, it's not just like, the kind of derivative assets, the like 15th largest asset on Bitcoin, right? Like, the top 10K PFPs are down 90 to 95% in BTC terms. Like, that's just shitty. Nobody likes that. It hurts morale. I don't think it's a long-term thing. I think it's a kind of market attention thing. I think the attention will come back. The idea of NFTs on Bitcoin, meme coins on Bitcoin, I think this is a very strong narrative. I do think we need to make it easier for people to buy these assets. I think that's the number one kind of takeaway that I've had. And yeah, look, I'm going to keep showing up every day with the dog army, spreading the message of tokens on Bitcoin and the free and fair movement. And we'll continue to do that. And I believe that, yeah, like a lot of companies, a lot of projects will get a little bit full of themselves when all the attention is on them. Attention moves around very quickly in this space. Like people will be talking about AI for 1 month and then SocialFi for the next month and then meme coins for the next month. And it just goes on and on and on. And I think the key is when the attention comes to you, you better be really, really ready. So like, are we even ready for the attention to come back to us in Bitcoin? I think we're getting there. I think we still have significant user experience issues that we have to address. And I think very smart developers are working every day to address them. Very smart teams are working on this, but we have to kind of be honest with ourselves around the trading experience on Bitcoin L1 does have some gaps. And, that's part of why, Operation Dog Domination, it's hard to say that without laughing. It's a little bit of a silly term, but, we need to make it easier for people to buy dog. And that means putting buy buttons in front of people with centralized exchanges, DEXs, and we're going to do that. And I think other Bitcoin assets will follow. And I think ultimately people should always be able to trade on Bitcoin L1. The asset should always be issued on Bitcoin L1. Like I don't want to own a Solana issued asset. I think it's not going to be a very long-term situation. But I think you can trade on some of these Bitcoin L2s or on some of these other chains and then bridge back to Bitcoin L1, very similar to how people will buy BTC and Coinbase like I did. And then now I own my Bitcoin, a self-custody situation, right? Or something like this. So we need to make it easier for people to buy these assets. And I think we're going to do that. And yeah, it does suck to watch things go down for, months and months and months on end. And I think hopefully we bottom at some point here and then come back and it'll be pretty incredible. We are in a crypto bull run. I think we can't forget that. But yeah, it's from a morale perspective, just be completely honest. Like, yeah, it really sucks. A lot of my friends, a lot of people in the ecosystem, just kind of watching that grind away at you for many months definitely sucks.
So you brought up a lot that we're going to dive into in more depth. I definitely want to come back to sort of the infrastructure UX challenges. Again, whole section on that we're going to get into. Before we do, I just sort of want to kind of underscore. So is that really sort of the primary issue that's driven the challenges of the past 10 months, this sort of most recent downtrend in Bitcoin native assets from your perspective? Is there anything else that you might point to that you think, kind of maybe driving the current downtrend that we're experiencing?
So like, as far as I can tell with like the Runes Bitcoin meme coins, we're an asset class of Bitcoin meme coins that lives within a larger asset class of just meme coins on all chains. So when dog goes to $960 million, right? That's basically timed perfectly with all of the Solana meme coins at their all-time highs. And then those go down over the summer and then dog goes down. And then those come back and there's another wave of Solana meme coins. You can just look at the total value of all meme coins chart. Dog is tracking with that chart basically, right? So 3 months ago, we hit a new all-time high, $1 billion. And then all of the top meme coins on all chains are crashing 75% down. So dog is also down 75%. That is what I attribute specifically the meme coins to. Probably NFTs are somewhat of a similar situation. If you want Bitcoin meme coins to be successful, probably you want NFTs as an asset class to be succeeding on all chains. Maybe we do just completely eat all chains NFTs very quickly here, but probably, Bitcoin NFTs are probably not going to have a major comeback until you start hearing that NFTs are having a comeback. So meme coins and NFTs down quite a bit from all-time highs right now. This also means Bitcoin NFTs, Bitcoin meme coins are going to be down as well. So a lot of it I can attribute to that. But I think also it's like, okay, that's true, but also maybe we could be more valuable than we are today. And I do think a lot of it has to do with just user experience, right? Like, people in other ecosystems come to Bitcoin and, they'll complain about the 10-minute block times. They'll complain about people front running them. we're working on solving different things, right? Like it shouldn't feel like you're buying an NFT when you buy a Bitcoin meme coin like dog, right? Like we're working on these things. People are creating kind of AMM type products. There's improvement here, but look, just the reality, I think we have to be completely honest with ourselves. Like Solana can create an app that retail can, literally onboard $500 of USD with like Apple Pay to in 60 seconds after downloading it, and then click a button and own $500 of a coin. And that's just not, that's not where we're at today. And like, that is what retail wants. That's why 20 million, like that's why apps like Moonshot got 20 million downloads in the past 2 months, more than Coinbase got, right? So I think you have to acknowledge that like that user experience is what retail wants. And ultimately, we're going to do as good as we possibly can on Bitcoin L1 to make the absolute best trading experiences possible. But I think also, just like with BTC, 99.9% of the world does not buy their BTC on Bitcoin L1. They buy it through some other wrapped token type asset on a centralized exchange, on Solana, on Ethereum. And I think we need to kind of embrace that, like, that's how Bitcoin got to a $2 trillion market cap. If you had to, have a ledger and buy BTC on Bitcoin L1, it would not have a $2 trillion market cap.
So, I mean, what I'm hearing is a few things, but number one, that, perhaps the performance of Bitcoin native assets broadly isn't specific to Bitcoin native assets. It's more of sort of a Bitcoin spot dominance issue in the entire crypto wide ecosystem. Am I getting that right? First of all,
that's correct.
Fair?
That's correct.
And it sounds like also your point of view is that ordinals are going most likely of all the crypto assets out there to trade most similarly to NFTs on other chains, right? I think there was a thesis for a long time that ordinals would track spot Bitcoin. And that, you heard this narrative of ordinals being a leveraged play on Bitcoin, but they're actually more likely correlated with the NFT ecosystem in general, because it is NFT buyers, after all, who are most interested in ordinals at the end of the day. Would you also agree with that?
I think I generally agree with that. I would say, I think the way I think about it is like, there's a certain amount of people in the world who hear about an NFT collection and they're interested in buying NFTs, and they hear about it and it's an NFT collection that's like off chain on Ethereum, right? Or it is an NFT collection fully on chain on Bitcoin. I think that is what people want. We have not packaged it and put it in front of them in a way that is as attractive as buying a meme coin on Moonshot. So they are choosing to buy, instead of even Ethereum NFTs or Bitcoin NFTs, people are choosing to buy some random Solana meme coin. Not because they want Solana meme coins over Bitcoin meme coins, or they want, Solana NFTs over Bitcoin NFTs. It's because it's easier for them. User experience does matter. User experience, decentralization, security, these are the trade-offs you make in blockchain, right? In blockchain tech. And ultimately, Bitcoin is the strongest security and the strongest decentralization. BTC got to where it is by issuing the asset BTC on a blockchain that has the strongest security decentralization. That is not where people trade the asset BTC, because the user experience is not good enough, right? So that is the paradigm for BTC being very valuable. And what I think the market wants, I think what people want is that they do want Bitcoin meme coins and Bitcoin NFTs way more than they want Ethereum or Solana meme coins and NFTs. But I think they want to trade them in an experience that is just like trading their Solana meme coins, right?
So let's just dig into that a little bit more deeply. So, and you kind of alluded to this idea that, Solana is likely to be like a flash in the pan, or these Solana meme coins are, not going to last. What about the argument that meme coins aren't meant to last, right? Have you given much thought to the idea that, I think there's a strong argument to be made that, meme coins are for gambling. It's supposed to be quick and fast, in and out. That's what people need when it comes to meme coins. And perhaps meme coins aren't meant to be, or designed to be, really satisfactory as like long-term collectibles. And this may even be sort of a distinction between the Ordinals use case versus, Runes or BRC20 or tokens on Bitcoin. What do you think of that? Do you think there is really, really strong desire for lasting forever meme coins? Or do you think that the Solana people might be onto something, that it really doesn't matter if the coins last forever, because they're just in it for, the fun degen games for the quick second that they're in it.
So my mental model is that there's a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you have BTC, very, very valuable, right? $2 trillion market cap. On the other end of the spectrum, you have a pump fund token on Solana that has a $100,000 market cap. And everything sits on that spectrum somewhere. And I can remember when Bitcoin was the $1 billion market cap, way on the other end of the spectrum. That's when I bought Bitcoin. And it felt a lot more like how people think about a Solana meme coin. And that will be offensive to certain Bitcoin maxis. But when I'm on the Bitcoin subreddit and people are memeing about Bitcoin, this is what it felt like. It's a non-utility token that's just a fixed amount of tokens on a blockchain. It's been branded incredibly well, right? It's very valuable. It's took on an entire new meaning. But ultimately, these are all just non-utility tokens that have, scarcity. And some of them are not very valuable, so they're going to be highly volatile. Some of them are very valuable on the other end of the spectrum, so they're not going to be very volatile. The volatility is the difference. And when it's highly volatile, that makes a really fun game of gambling and speculating. And when the volatility is not as high, it feels more like investing. This is the same as a stock market where people can buy penny stocks, or people can buy some, sketchy new electric car company or something like this. Or you can invest in like Meta or Apple or Amazon, right? The difference is the volatility. The more volatile, the more fun the trading game is. So that's the difference. I don't actually view a, dog as being that different. Solana meme coins being that different as like an actual primitive from Bitcoin. They're non-utility token. The utility token's entirely different conversation, but the actual primitive is just a scarce asset on a protocol on the internet. And then Bitcoin has the best properties for their primitive, right? Like BTC has very, very strong properties of security and decentralization. But these things, like Bitcoin, is more like a meme coin than I think people realize.
That is a bold move. That is definitely a bold statement. Maybe one of the most controversial things that I've heard come out of your mouth. So what about the argument that Bitcoin is the perfect money, right? I mean, I think that's arguably, like, that is what the maxis are really saying, is that Bitcoin does have a use case, Bitcoin does have utility, and it's to be perfect money. You could not say that about, 1,000 or plus more Solana meme coins. I mean, what do you say to that?
So if the Solana meme coin gets to the market cap of Bitcoin, I think it's pretty similar as money. So I know that's offensive, but it's the volatility. The volatility is the delta. So if something's volatile, and I would argue Bitcoin is still way too volatile to be money, Bitcoin will eventually, I think we're all hoping, and this is certainly the future that I want, Bitcoin will be worth hundreds of trillions of dollars, and it will replace the US dollar as a global reserve currency. I think that's the direction we're heading in. For Bitcoin to have utility as money, it cannot be changing 10% in a day. It cannot be going from 70,000 to 13,000. Like, this is not good money. This is very bad use case of money. And you don't have to look very far or do much to kind of understand that this is the case, right? Like, people in Argentina, like, they store value in money. Like, they store value in BTC. They do not use it for their currency. They download Binance and trade USDT. Like, that's how they swap and buy for things, right? And buy things. So the stable coins are much, much better forms of money today from just a practical utility perspective. Long term, Bitcoin will have similar levels of volatility to something like USD. USD is not, it's not a perfect stable coin, right? Like, it actually does change. Like, there's inflation. It's not the perfect situation. There is volatility with USD. We can feel that. But ultimately, Bitcoin will get to a point where it has similar levels of volatility to USD. And then you're basically going to get a version of USD that is like way, way better for a ton of reasons we can get into that, basically are ultimately just allowing people to have a more pure form of money that they have control over, that doesn't, inflate on them and doesn't get manipulated and isn't used to basically force them to do things and incentivize them to do things.
Well, and to your point, one of the problems with the US dollar as money is the fact that there are all these competing foreign currencies, right? And perfect money really should accrue value to one specific currency only, right? The more currencies there are, the more problematic all of the money is. Would you say if Bitcoin is just sort of like the biggest and baddest meme coin and there's all these other meme coins floating around, is that competitive with Bitcoin in terms of fighting for the title of money? Does that hurt Bitcoin's proposition as the one true money?
So I do agree. Like money, it's more of just like a utility of like, I want something that I can count on tomorrow being worth the same. That's money. Bitcoin's terrible at that today. It's going up a lot. So that's not why you would buy Bitcoin. You buy Bitcoin today because you want to make money. You want number go up. That's why I bought Bitcoin. That's why pretty much everyone I know buys Bitcoin. That's why people are excited about Bitcoin, is number go up. Now, long term, I do think like, look, why on earth would you use a money that is not as good at money as something else? Like, I think Bitcoin will be that money, and then you probably won't use the money. You won't use the other tokens for money as much.
You won't use your money as once it becomes clear that Bitcoin is the best.
It's like, why would you use any, like, we have a bunch of fiat currencies today because these nation states basically force you, like legally you have to, within their bounds, borders, use that currency. We're moving into an internet kind of situation where those borders don't matter as much. The economy's moving into protocols on the internet. And I think there will be kind of like one global 21 million Bitcoin currency that every country will use and it transact. And this is probably like 50 years away, just to be clear. I don't think it happens as fast as a lot of the kind of maxis think. I don't think there's like this overnight collapse situation, but I do think we get there. And I do think like that's what I'll be using as money. I think it'll be the most logical thing. What I want with money is to be able to, go buy a coffee and always have it cost the same as much as a coffee, right? And I don't want to have to think about it. And then when I want to store value, I'll do that with other assets, right? That's pretty much my thoughts. Yeah.
And to your point, I mean, volatility is not the only problem with Bitcoin being perfect money, or at least perfect medium of exchange, if we're making this distinction between medium of exchange and store of value, right? I mean, the other issue, to your point, is UX, right? And Bitcoin is not currently really that functional as a payment system. I mean, we're getting there, but 8 billion people cannot use Bitcoin as payments right now.
But you can.
I can.
You do it in a centralized way. You don't do it on chain. Is how you do that.
Right. You need some sort of like layer 2, right? You need some sort of other layer, which substantially reduces the benefits of Bitcoin's, the other properties that make it good money, right? Decentralization, censorship resistant, right? Like those things go away when you do it in a centralized way, right? So there's a lot of people working on that problem. We won't get too deep into that, but it's a perfect segue into the UX conversation, which I think now is the perfect time to get into the UX conversation. So from your perspective, I mean, you've alluded to, we have legitimate UX concerns. These are things that we need to be honest about. Tell me from your perspective, what are the real problems with, let's start with Runes, and maybe we could also talk about Ordinals as well. I don't know if you see a distinction there from a UX perspective. What is the market wanting from a UX perspective that they are not getting in more detail?
The market wants Coinbase with no KYC. That's the product that the market wants.
What about it?
Yeah, you want like you want instant transactions, right? You click a button and you instantly get your token. You pay no like transaction fees, or as little transaction fees as possible. You cannot have this situation where you're trying to buy $50 of a token and paying a $50 transaction fee. This just completely breaks down and doesn't work for a lot of people, right?
Or a $50 ordinal and you're paying, $20.
Exactly. There have been periods of time where the mempool, is so high that it becomes irrational to trade everything except the top 20 ordinals collections. That's not a good situation. You have to somehow figure out a solution to that. And also, I think the sniping and MEV, every chain deals with this, by the way, but other chains are just a little better at dealing with it. We've made very great strides there. I think there will be more issues in the future with MEV on Bitcoin, but at least for today, if you ask like people from Solana who came and bought Runes and Ordinals, and over the last summer, you asked them like, what's your biggest issue? They would tell you the sniping. And we have created solutions that essentially resolve this. I'm not saying it's completely solved, but it's much better and you don't hear people talking about as much. So like that's, I would say like I'm pretty happy with our solutions to sniping today.
And that's technical solutions to sniping, not just that like the market's down and so sniping is happening.
Correct. There are technical solutions that have a little bit of a trade-off around trust. So I think this is a call out. You're always
solution that Magic Eden implement. What solution specifically are you referring to?
Yeah, so Magic Eden and Satflow both implemented solutions for trading runes and ordinals, such that it's basically when you list the token, when you list one of these tokens, it sits in this sort of like middleman, two people, two signer type situation, has to sign state. And yeah, basically there are scenarios where it could be rugged.
By one of the signers?
Yes. I think it's
Magic Eden would be one of the signers, or Satflow would be one of the signers in this situation? Okay.
Correct. Yeah, like the way to think about it is you're taking your ordinal that you want to list, right? And you're basically giving them control to steal it from you at any time, but you also have control to bring it back to yourself at any time. Ugh. So it's not the most ideal situation.
You're not giving it to them, but they could steal it.
They do not technically own it. So this is why it's not a KYC situation.
A one of two signing situation, basically?
Yes, but it only takes one to sign, is my point. So either side can basically take the asset. So you're trusting Magic Eden and Satflow to not rug all of those assets that are listed.
And the idea of how this prevents sniping basically is like if somebody tries to snipe your asset, Magic Eden can like front run them?
It creates this like atomic swap where Magic Eden is, by having that extra signer, they are verifying that the person that bought it through their site is the only person who can receive the asset for it to be complete. So the atomic swap, the PSBT, will not complete on chain unless it goes to a specific address. Currently today, that is how it works. If before, when you listed an ordinal inscription, you're saying anybody in the world can buy this. Okay. So then when somebody buys it, it goes into the mem pool. Well, someone else can say, well, you've made it so that anyone can buy it. I'm going to take the same transaction, strip out the other person who bought it and put myself in. And that's totally valid. What we're doing now is we're saying, hey, I'm going to list my inscription for sale. And then Magic Eden in the middle is saying, okay, that's great. Anyone can come along and buy it. But when they do, I'm going to stamp and say, only this person now can buy this. And then you submit it to the mempool. And then only that person can buy it. Nobody can take it out of the mempool and replace themselves because it would be an invalid transaction.
Interesting. I feel like this is like, I feel like I need to have like Robert Clark on here to like.
He would be great. He would be really good.
Satflow, did Magic Eden implement this first, or was this a Satflow idea, or was this just sort of like everyone got the bug at the same time? Like, who do we credit for this?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I would say like, I believe Greg and LIFO FIFO both had put out some potentially theoretical diagrams for how to do this. Magic Eden and Satflow then kind of a little race kicked off.
Yeah.
And they came out with it in the same week. So it's kind of like, I don't think it matters like too much. Both teams implemented it and then shipped it in the same week.
LIFO FIFO is also on my list of people to have on the pod. So
you should definitely get LIFO FIFO on. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so the sniping issue you think is like mostly resolved. It's an imperfect solution, but it's enough of a solution, particularly for like retail investors who probably don't even care about this level of detail around the tech, to your point, right? What else do we have to worry about on the UX side, or what do we have to address on the UX side from your perspective?
10-minute block times. People are used to in other blockchains clicking a button and pretty quickly getting the asset. Here, it kind of has a spinner for a while. So I don't really see any solution to that.
Do you think that
Bitcoin L1
for tokens than it is for ordinals?
I think for ordinals, it's interesting. Like, you know, there's two types of people in both meme coins and ordinals, right? In NFTs. People in NFTs, there's collectors and flippers. In meme coins, there are traders and the kind of long-term believers, right? Who are just holding Dogecoin for like multi-year type situation. If you are truly just making a one-time purchase of an asset and planning to hold it for months, years, you don't really have a big problem waiting 10 minutes. It's not ideal, but you don't have a huge issue with that. But if you are just trying to kind of like play around with a bunch of assets and like whichever one of them goes up, maybe you'll sell some, but maybe you'll like, you haven't decided what's your kind of believe asset that you want to hold for a long time. People do want to just be able to buy 100 NFTs, you know, in 2021, you were probably minting every NFT collection. You ended up to, you know, you paid 0.08 ETH to mint Bored Ape Yacht Club. You weren't planning on necessarily holding Bored Ape Yacht Club until 150 ETH, but it emerged as an asset and community. It was one of the 100 collections that you minted and traded. And then now you're actually a Bored Ape Yacht Club PFP and you're part of the community. You kind of like went from trading and flipping to then long-term believer in something. We have trouble attracting those people because they don't want to wait 10 minutes. So unless you're like totally sold on, you know, I love this community, I want to buy it and hold it forever, I'm fine to like jump through these hoops. Most people don't have the level of conviction that we do, Isabel. They're casual retail type situation, and they just want to kind of play around with this tech, trade some tokens, and maybe they pick a token that's like really valuable, and then that's a big winner for them, and they might hold it for a very long time. But most people are more just playing around, experimenting, buying a lot of tokens. I hold tens of thousands of NFTs on Ethereum, for example. I don't necessarily have conviction in all of them.
But even for NFTs, you would say like the average person can't even like hang on to their NFTs for 10 minutes without getting anxiety. Like, do you feel like people really need like 10-minute level liquidity on their NFTs? Like, it makes a little bit more sense for me that with tokens, like you need like instant settlement basically. But I mean, are you like really sticking to this, that like it's the same for NFTs?
Well, I'm definitely sticking to this. It's like there's collectors who have no issue. I have no issue with it at all. The vast majority of the market does have an issue with it. If you watch somebody use TikTok, like watch somebody just for like 2 minutes, just watch them using TikTok, right? Like they're just scrolling through, watching something for half a second. It doesn't interest them. Move to the next thing for half a second. Then they see one they really like, they'll watch it for 6 seconds. It's like, that's what you're competing with. Like this is the attention span of like 90% of people, right? This is unfortunate reality of like, most people are not the connoisseur art collector. Unfortunately, they're on these apps just like very, 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 very short attention spans. 10 minutes is like, you know, they could have done so much in 10 minutes type situation.
Okay, so to your point, right? You just said it. Most people are not the connoisseur art collector. Most people are not collectors, is what it sounds like. Most people, you would say the majority of people are more on the trading side of things. Collectors exist, but like traders may make up like a greater share of greater mind share. If that's the case, what is your defense of Bitcoin tokens, Bitcoin NFTs? What is the defense of Bitcoin tokens if we can't meet the UX criteria of, the shitcoin casinos on Solana?
So we can issue the tokens on Bitcoin and trade them off of Bitcoin L1. Like this is sort of the fundamental answer that I think
where this is going.
I'm not saying that this is like how our community of like 10,000, 50,000 hardcore, we have the luxury to like be full-time Bitcoin people. I am more than happy. I will trade on Bitcoin L1 forever. Like I have no issue at all with this, right? I am more than happy. I understand it. The other 8 billion people on earth, they want to download an app on the App Store and like click a button. And if you want to tap into that liquidity, you need to meet those people where they are. And I think I keep coming back to Bitcoin.
Do you think that this is going to happen mostly on, kind of more trust minimized L2s or, whatever level of trustlessness is possible L2s that are being developed? Or do you see this as being, mostly a game that centralized exchanges will eventually, eat up?
I think this will happen same as Bitcoin. So a lot of people, hundreds of millions of people will own assets in centralized exchanges. I think more and more will own them in essentially what is a decentralized exchange on a very fast, great experience, L2, sidechain, blockchain, other L1. And then even, this will sound crazy, but I think over the coming years, like the top 100 crypto assets, and some of them will probably be meme coins, will get put into traditional wrappers in our traditional financial system, and you'll be able to like click a button in Fidelity and own like the top 100 index of cryptocurrencies. That's what people really want, right? They want to just click a button and have exposure to the market the same way they do with something like the S&P 500. It's the simplest form factor. I think NFTs will get bundled into that. CryptoPunks will get bundled into that. And this asset class is just very immature today. So we don't have things like that. But yeah, most people will have exposure to this asset class in some equivalent of a Fidelity account, or like 2% of their kind of long-term savings are in some sort of balanced crypto top 100 tokens, some NFTs, some meme coins maybe mixed in their type situation. And that'll be bundled with some larger index fund type situation where, again, click a button, you own everything. This is the end game.
I guess my next question would be like, do you think average users care about things like trust minimization and sort of these kind of more trust minimized layer 2 solutions? Or do you think that that's also kind of a meme? Like, how bullish are you on these trust minimized L2s in terms of adoption specifically? I mean, I think we're probably both on the same page, very cool tech, but like, do you think that they're going to be adopted? Do you think that the market cares about these L2s, or they're just going to go straight to the centralized exchanges, which basically is just a matter of convincing, leadership at these places to list the thing?
So I think you framed it really well. The competition for these L2s is the centralized exchanges, right? These are the competitors. I don't view these L2s as being Bitcoin. Like, again, this will offend, I don't think it'll offend you. It may offend some people, but people will say, hey, this is a Bitcoin L2 and the tokens you issue it are Bitcoin tokens. And like, I categorically in no way agree with that statement. And I think it's a lot of kind of marketing, but I do think these places are great places to trade tokens. I think it's basically a more trust minimized version of Coinbase. I think if we have a 1933 type scenario where the Fed says we're seizing all of your gold, you have to sell it to us at this fixed price in the next couple of months, and it's illegal to own more than a certain amount of gold. If they were to do that to crypto, to BTC, I think you would be happy that there was some sort of distributed system bridge to a Bitcoin L2, which is also decently distributed around the world. It's going to be a lot harder for the Fed to steal your BTC in that situation than it is going to be to just have, guys in suits walk into Coinbase and say, like, give us all the Bitcoin. So I think moving on chain, moving into more distributed systems away from a single custodian like Coinbase is very important. I do believe in a future of self-custody and DEXs. I think there's a lot of issues. Like, we're just very early with this. There's a lot of issues with it today, but I do think things can get more trust minimized over time. And there may be bridge hacks, there may be issues, there may be bugs in code, there might be decentralization issues on some of these chains, there might be Ponzi issues. Like, there's going to be issues. Like, in many regards, I almost do trust Coinbase maybe more than I trust some of these L2 type situations today. But I think we're going to get there. And I do think the future has to be trading on chain, such that the government can't just keep all the assets. It's not long term. We cannot just say the answer is banks. Coinbase is a bank, right? That cannot be the answer. We have to build distributed systems and decentralized systems to, trade and custody these assets. And I don't think that world just looks like everybody trading and owning Bitcoin on Bitcoin L1.
I think this is a very good opportunity maybe to move into my next segment of the interview, which is DOG potentially getting onto centralized exchanges, and more broadly, your experience, attempting to get runes listed and how working with sexes has been. I mean, you've had some very interesting takes on Twitter that I want to get into. But before I do that, I think just to wrap up the UX conversation, a lot of what I was certainly hearing from like retailers, especially coming from other ecosystems around the time of the halvening, were things like runes are going to bring the Bitcoin DeFi revolution. And, I think there was a lot of false expectations that were not met about the UX. Why do you think that was? Do you think that was just sort of misunderstanding about the tech? Do you think sort of leadership level folks, whether that be like KOLs or Casey himself or anyone involved, could have done more to manage expectations? Like, what's your take on that?
So I think what like most people want to do is it's the same as it has been for the past 16 years. People want to like buy, sell, and hold tokens. This is like the vast majority of people. I think there are a class of individuals who want to do kind of like crazy DeFi farming and loans and leverage and all this stuff. Most people just want to spot trade tokens and hold them securely. That's like what most people want to do. And my sort of view on this is the Bitcoin L1 experience of Runes. I do believe there is a significant improvement from BRC20. I don't think it's the perfect solution ever. I think we can probably upgrade and improve Runes over time, but I do think it is similar to BTC, living natively in UTXOs, having this very tiny on-chain footprint, where it's basically taking one transaction instead of two. It's, costs quite a bit less to do a transfer because there's very small amounts of data that are needing to be put on chain. I think this is like, I would say like Runes is something along the lines of like just BRC20, but done in a little bit more technically sophisticated manner, but it's not that crazy different than BRC20. It's just a little bit technically better, a little bit better experience on Bitcoin L1. And ultimately, yeah, like I think we definitely fell short in some regards there. And look, I think I know BRC20 doing some interesting stuff. I've ultimately always like, I bought a bunch of Ordi under $1. Like I support BRC20. I did not like the sort of direction that it took with like, I liked Domo's version of BRC20. I did not like one company's centralized version of BRC20.
That specifically?
UniSat, you said?
Are you referencing UniSat? Yeah.
Correct. I didn't really have interest in supporting a centralized fungible token standard on Bitcoin.
Because the indexer was centralized. That was your concern?
This is like much more of my appeal to Runes than actually just that they're, I like the technical improvements. I like some of the efficiency gains on L1. My much bigger reason is like, had Domo maintained control and sort of been able to navigate that into a more decentralized open source type thing, I think that would have been great. The powers that be in BRC20, it seemed to me that for about 9-10 months, you have a indexer that is closed source that nobody can see. So this is a major issue to me. For the first few months, I'm like, okay, we can tolerate this. It's really new. All of a sudden, like Runes are about to come out and it still hasn't been open source. This is very weird to me. And then I watched in January this little kind of showdown between Domo and UniSat with the sort of little upgrade around what's going to be, how are we going to determine state of BRC20 when Ordinals, which it builds on top of, upgrades, right? And there was a little showdown there. And regardless of the outcome of the actual like technical side of how that played out, it basically became very clear to me that a single company controlled BRC20 and was basically like they're not just they're a for-profit company that has this closed source indexer for the fungible token standard of Bitcoin. They also are using that to commercially benefit because they have the number one wallet for it. They have the number one place you can trade it. This is not how I want people to trade fungible tokens on Bitcoin. And Casey was presenting this alternative option where he's going to publish a GitHub repo and it's going to be more open source and you're going to be able to run it yourselves. And like my company, for example, is able to run it. We couldn't do that with BRC20. It felt much more fair and open in the way you would want a fungible token standard on Bitcoin to be. And that was much, much more my issue with BRC20. I think Domo probably even somewhat shares my vision for BRC20, but ultimately kind of lost the power play. And then, that is what it is.
Yeah, and I think that, I actually think that these are fair points, right? And specifically the thing that I think is the most fair point, the biggest turnoff probably about BRC20 in the past is the fact that UniSat did keep it closed source, which was a point of contention, I think, and like a significant issue. Obviously on the centralization front, Casey is also a single point of failure. Domo would also be a single point of failure. But I hear you on kind of the for-profit, being maybe a little bit different. I don't know how different, but a little bit differently, definitely for an independent developer to be running the indexer versus a for-profit company. So I hear you, fair points. Something that Domo has also spoken a lot about, which I think people are starting to talk about now, I think Beezy also referenced this in his interview, is the issue with sort of fragmentation, right? And the concern that perhaps the launch of Runes created liquidity fragmentation, created mindshare fragmentation, created developer resource fragmentation that may be contributing to, again, the sort of downtrend that we're experiencing in the Bitcoin native asset ecosystem broadly. What do you say about that? I mean, Domo is sort of pretty careful not to attack Runes when I think he probably could also make his own points there. That has not been your style. What do you think?
So, I mean, yeah, first of all, I think, Beezy is like a very, very smart dude that like, he's got his like finger on the pulse of everything really, really well. Always respected his opinions on things. Domo, look, man, it's like the guy is a legend. Like he basically Runes is sort of like BRC20. It's got the minting model. It's got a lot of the aspects. Like
it's not that
Domo in a way is like almost like the inspiration for Runes. Like Runes is almost like BRC20 2.0, just like a better, improved, technically superior version is how I would think about it. As far as how I communicate about it, my personal belief is that, yeah, you don't want to have two kind of fungible token standards with equal amounts of value. People want kind of clarity. My personal view is that the Bitcoin ecosystem is much better off just migrating to Runes. Basically upgrading from BRC20 to Runes for a bunch of different reasons, but specifically, if anything, you don't have these two standards like competing with each other. From my perspective, Binance and UniSat basically control BRC20. Like this is my perspective on it. People can agree, people can disagree. That's just what I personally believe. I think that's where the money is around BRC20. And yeah, that's kind of my view.
Could change in an instant with more centralized exchanges picking it up, right? I mean, like if other centralized exchanges just adopted BRC20, that would change. Right now, Runes has no centralized exchange adoption, which we will get into in a moment, right? But I don't think that that's a fundamental characteristic of BRC20. What do you think?
So I think the issue specifically with you kind of made the centralization point where you're saying Casey is centralizing, Runes or this sort of thing. The open source issue is like the main thing, because if there's a world where, for example, Domo wants to fork off from Unisat's version of BRC20 and the community supports him, he literally basically doesn't have the ability to do this because Unisat does not show Domo the indexer, right?
Well, so Unisat is now everyone's now using OPI, basically, is my understanding. I believe that everyone's using OPI, which is open source.
Right. And this is great. I'm very glad to see like it moved in this direction. The reason I moved in the Runes direction a year ago was that is not the direction I was seeing things in. And pretty much, I'm very glad that's eventually happened. I personally view BRC20 still as very much being in the control of Unisat. People can agree or disagree with me. I still think the powers that be, Unisat controls BRC20. And if Unisat tweets out that they're changing to have 3 tickers, I think nobody can really do a whole lot about that. Potentially, there could be some kind of rally around it. The point that I'm making is that BRC20 has had a brain drain from a developer builder perspective, okay? And that Binance specifically is propping up the value of BRC20 and not accurately reflecting the value of BRC20 tokens. Without Binance on a level playing field with Runes would be much more valuable. This is just like the point that I'm making here. And yeah, basically like it's fine. Unisat and BRC20 and Binance have an agreement together, and that is what it is. And they can try to prop up BRC20 as much as they want. I don't think they're going to age very well doing that. That's my personal perspective. So.
Fair point. Another fair point. I think that it is also probably inarguable that one of the reasons why BRC20 is maintaining its position right now as sort of highest volume traded Bitcoin native asset is because it has centralized exchange liquidity, which we're going to get into more in a moment and kind of look into, what the future holds there when it comes to Runes.
Final point on that. If BRC20 was like Domo and a bunch of different kind of startups in the ecosystem building around BRC20, I probably would have never left to go to Runes, right? I do take issue with like Binance and Unisat running the fungible token standard of Bitcoin. I just fundamentally cannot get behind that. And, people can disagree with that or whatever they want, but like that is personally what I believe. That is the financial agreement that I see occurring behind the scenes and supporting those top 2 tokens. And that's the core issue I would say that I have with BRC20 is that situation.
That I think is potentially very fair. Again, I think things have sort of changed, and Domo's doing his best to sort of decentralize the leadership, as you say. But certainly, right, you don't have a UniSat kind of core lead maintainer figure happening in the Runes ecosystem. So I hear you there. I will say something else that I just want to like double tap on. It does sound like you are kind of sharing with us that this was more of a concern about centralization, the power of UniSat, kind of more of a political concern than a technical concern at the end of the day. Before I move on with my next question, would you say that it sounds like that's what you're saying? Is that accurate, that was a bigger concern than the technical piece of it?
Yeah, I think like if I had to try to put it in relative terms, like Runes is like 10 or 20% technically superior to BRC20. And that's usually not enough to make people switch to something. But from a culture ethos perspective, I very much aligned with Domo's version of BRC20. The dynamics seem to happen such that Domo, his version of BRC20, at least a year ago, he was not getting to have his version of BRC20 play out, and other entities did. And I was like, okay, so be it. Like, this is not my war to fight. That's how it is. I'm going to support something that has an ethos around open source development and a culture and a community that feels like it's owned by everyone, and not like every time I tweet about it, I'm like propping up some multi-billion-dollar company.
Really quickly on the technical note, right? So just kind of pivoting gears a little bit, just like a final thought on the sort of BRC20 Runes chat on the technical side. So like you said, Runes has a sort of like marginally more elegant technical design for a lot of reasons. But one thing that I think does sort of also is sort of like a distinction between these two protocols on the technical side. Casey is, pretty anti-programmability as a concept. He has no interest in introducing programmability or smart contracts or sort of like Turing complete style computing on the indexer layer of Runes. The BRC20 team is attempting to do that. I think that, again, it's unclear how that's all going to pan out. But would you agree that that would be a major, if that does work out and that it actually does pan out the way that they're hoping it, would you agree that that would be like enough of a major technical distinction to maybe change the tune on the technical benefits of Runes over BRC20?
So I think one way or another, whether it's through OpCat, whether it's through some kind of clever upgrade to the indexers for BRC20 or something like this, I think you're probably going to have AMMs on Bitcoin L1 at some point. At some point in the future, it'll get figured out. The point that I will more make is that I don't think that's how the vast majority of people will trade these tokens. I think they'll do it on different environments because you still have the long block times.
Regardless of whether or not it's at the indexer level or through OpCat or through another trust minimized L2. Like basically, regardless of that, people are still going to do most of the trading in probably custodial ways. Is that what you're saying?
I think if you view BRC20 and Runes as like a zero-sum game between like the 10,000 hardcore people who are like Bitcoin ecosystem natives holding them, then yeah, it's bullish for BRC20 to release that. If you view this as us trying to unlock, hundreds of billions of dollars of token value on top of Bitcoin L1, I don't think you scale. I don't think you do that just on Bitcoin L1. I think Bitcoin L1 is a piece of that equation, but bridging into centralized exchanges and other environments and other chains for faster, easier trading is ultimately where most of that volume will happen. And I mean, that's just factually true today, right? Like, Dog over the past 2 months has averaged about $50 million of volume a day on centralized exchanges. And that's way, way more than what happens on chain. And I think that will only continue to grow.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so I think we've sort of completed enough of the BRC20 Runes debate. That was good, though. I really enjoyed that.
No, I have a lot of respect for Domo, and just look, my thought here is I want us to move to one thing. I don't think it's good to have two competing things for too long. It just makes it confusing to people. So my view is like, whether you move to BRC20 or Runes, let's just get around one protocol. That's what I want to see happen. Ultimately, I'm just placing my bet on Runes. That's basically the difference.
Fair. Okay, so let's move on to the centralized exchange listings conversation. I'm conscious of the time, so we're going to whip through the next few questions, but I think this is a super important question. So you've you shared some interesting takes about your experiences, I assume, trying to get dog listed on centralized exchanges. Is that accurate? I mean, are you talking to exchanges right now? What's your experience been, if so? Let's just start there.
Yeah, so I still talk to centralized exchanges every week. I have had a very interesting kind of eye-opening experience with centralized exchanges. I think, there's two pieces to this conversation. It's one, hey, please integrate with this new protocol on Bitcoin called Runes. That's like step one. And step two is list the top token on it. It's called Dog. By the way, we are not going to pay a listing fee. Those are the two pieces to these conversations. I can make
committed to not paying a listing fee. If you could, let's just say, I have no idea what the financial situation is in your back pocket. I mean, is this like philosophical, you're not going to pay it? Or it's just like, we're independent, like fair launch people and we don't have the money. Like, what's the deal with this?
Yeah, it's purely philosophical. Like the entire reason for me, I received 11 Runestones, right? And it's like, I received 9 Runestones, 11 RSIC. So I messed that up. People will fund me for saying that. But the point is I've received less than 1/10,000th of the supply of Runestones and gave a few of them away and then even received less dog. I have not bought a single dog. It is very much a philosophical situation. Okay. So yes, we probably could get some whales together and tomorrow get some exchange listings, right? It is a philosophical, dog is a experiment of not bending to the knee to a bunch of entrenched interests who are basically erecting these sort of barriers in the market that you have to basically pay the toll booth to get through. And what I personally believe in is okay, this is a free market. So they're able to, guard their liquidity and erect these toll booths and basically charge people a lot of money to get into the liquidity pool that they have, right? I also, and retail gets to say, you can go screw yourself. We're not going to be doing that. And specifically the reason why I don't like this practice of, hey, let's set aside 20% of every meme coin that's launched so that we can kind of pay off all of these centralized exchanges. The reason I don't like that is because what's actually happening behind the scenes is that exchange is promoting it with a tweet, right? The listing announcement. It's guaranteed to basically pump when Binance, for example, lists a token. They take their huge listings fee and then they legally are going to say, hey, we're just using it to market make. This is the same as the one-sided Meteora LP kind of BS. You're just selling the token. You are literally selling the token on your own users. You are dumping the token. These guys are Binance, I would actually argue, is pseudo the creator of a lot of these low cap meme coins that they have sort of launched. These they've launched a bunch of 20, 30, $40 million meme coins that they send to $1 billion. I cannot imagine a world where they are not making an absolute killing on that situation, whether it's an entity or a hedge fund tied to them, like an Alameda situation, whatever it is. Unless these are the stupidest people on earth, there has to be rampant insider trading going on. Otherwise, why are you going to throw your reputation down the drain by listing some scammy, pump fund AI token that was $30 million that rugged? The answer is you don't. Nobody would do that.
Right? Even if there isn't insider trading going on, to your point, right? It's just the incentives of this whole thing are just it's like communism. It's it's like authoritarian economics happening where the exchanges are just controlling everything. I mean, I'm totally with you on this. I'm actually very impressed with you. I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, I mean, I'm actually wondering if you could speak to kind of how this actually plays out to affect users, in terms of just how screwed up these incentives are for the exchanges. What are the impacts of this on actual users, in your opinion?
So if you want to create a meme coin and have it go beyond $1 billion, you pretty much have to tap into the liquidity of these centralized exchanges. Binance and a bunch of these exchanges have a total cumulative about 500 million users who are going to have a buy button put in front of them and an email sent to them that says you can buy this coin. It is very, very, very challenging today to get a meme coin over $1 billion without writing them a check and sending them a bunch of the tokens so that they do that for you.
So you can't do a fair launch because you actually need to save 20% of your tokens to pay the fees to the exchanges, essentially.
Yes, and unfortunately, it's not just the exchanges, right? It's like you're supposed to pay off market makers, you're supposed to pay off centralized exchanges, you're supposed to pay off KOL networks. Like if you want the Solana cabal to tweet about your thing, and some of these top guys tweet about your coin, and it won't be like, hey, you should buy this. It'll be like they'll drop a little eyes emoji on a tweet about it. If you want their support, they're going to need to basically be given the token for free or effectively free before it launches. So this could be, here's the contract address that's going public in 1 minute. You can buy it first for a very low value. Or, hey, you can, sign this token warrant that's going to give you access to a bunch of tokens when the market cap is valued at 5 million. And by the way, we've done this whole situation where we're playing the game the way it's supposed to be played, where we've lined up this market maker and we've lined up these centralized exchange listings, and we've got these other KOLs who are going to tweet about it. And you tee up this whole thing, and by paying off 50% of the tokens to all of these different people, you get to have your token go to $1 billion. And this is what's been happening in Solana for many, many months now. And there's a massive lack of leadership because nobody's been calling that out. It's actually been celebrated.
But is calling it out working? I mean, how do you solve this? Or is this just sort of natural capitalistic incentives, I guess, in this case, just playing themselves out? Like people are always going to do what's in their best financial interest. They figured out that they can do this. They have some power in the situation. How do you really fight that? I mean, is this sort of piece of activism that you're performing? Is it working?
So, if retail is just a bunch of individuals who don't organize, 100%, they're just going to get cleaned out every time. And insiders will absolutely set up the incentives and control basically the value creation. And Binance, regardless if the token rugs or not, they never lose when they list these tokens, right? They're just getting free tokens. they take on no risk, really. Dog is saying, we're not going to play that game at all. That game, we've seen how that game ends with ICOs. We've seen how that game ends with celebrity NFTs. We're not going to play that game. It's the same thing over and over and over every cycle.
What's their response?
Say it again.
What's their response? I mean, when you say this to them,
Okay, sorry. Just to be clear, this is not what I'm saying to the centralized.
Okay.
Yeah,
you effectively are, right? I mean, you effectively, maybe
yes,
different way.
Yeah. I'm saying, like,
we'd love to be listed on your exchange, and by the way, we're not going to pay the fee. What's their response?
So specifically what I say is, we're a decentralized fair launch coin that has no team treasury. We can't pay your fee. That is the message that I'm sending. I'm not saying I think you're evil. That's not what I'm saying.
Do you reference BRC20 as a previous example of like a fair launch coin that a centralized exchange did pick up?
So I don't, because I don't believe that there weren't centralized exchange listing fees paid on Ordi and Sats. So I don't cite that. Yeah.
Okay.
But
I have no idea.
Yeah. But the bottom line is, I do the best to basically, pitch centralized exchanges on the other value that they can get from listing Dog, right? And that's actually worked. Dog is listed on about 15 centralized exchanges that have integrated Rune spot listings. They're not Binance. They're, tier 2 and tier 3. And then we've got perps on a handful of tier 1. And it's just a continuous process of trying to get integrations, trying to get listings, and making that pitch. And right now it's a very hard pitch because meme coins are down a lot. There's not going to be many meme coin listings on big tier 1 centralized exchanges because of that. What I want to do is
making the argument on volume, right? I mean, you're pitching this on volume alone, on like you will make money on volume on trades.
I'm pitching this as a brand activation for their company, so that while they're listing these like scammy coins that wreck their reputation, they can list Dog and try to bring some sort of group of people who supports their exchange and sort of says, hey, like, yeah, we are kind of like doing scammy listing practices, but we're also listing some coins and trying to make some effort to support decentralized fair launch coins as well. So we're not just completely corrupt. And I think there's an actual brand activation there and some PR that can be done around that I do believe benefits the reputation of their exchange and drives ultimately, downloads and deposits on their platform, because people do want to buy Dog. And there is a group of people, who have heard about Dog on TikTok, for example, and who can't buy it, who would buy it if it was listed on Binance, for example.
I think that's a great point. Super interesting. And you are kind of the perfect person to make that pitch. I appreciate that as a comms person myself. Do you think these token standards are ultimately dependent on centralized exchanges picking them up at some point?
So over the next 10 years, my belief is that, centralized exchanges will go to zero and all the trading will happen on chain. So if you look at the sort of history of trading tokens, Bitcoin comes out, you get these like Mt. Gox initial exchanges, a lot of OTC happening. For a very long time, all you could ever do is do OTC or trade on a centralized exchange. In 2017, there were a bunch of ICOs and sort of whispers around, I think we can do a DEX. I think we can trade on chain in a decentralized manner. Most of those ICOs ended very, very poorly, to say the least. A few of them, DYDX, like Uniswap, for example. Uniswap, does what I would consider to be innovation, and they create this automated market maker solution. And they deploy this to Ethereum, and it's very, very successful. And ever since that moment, you could imagine a chart, right, where you have 100% of the volume of tokens being traded being on centralized exchanges for a very long time. And then in 2019, 2020 DeFi summer, Uniswap coming out, you start for the first time to see that trend line change and start dipping down. And you see the decentralized trading on chain DEXs start to tick up. And the trend line is very clear there. And I think in time, in the coming years, there will be a flippening between decentralized exchange and centralized exchange volume. And I believe that that is a very, very important thing to happen in the market, because it will ultimately, instead of having these little isolated kind of oceans of liquidity or lakes of liquidity that all of these centralized exchanges are guarding, that they're charging these exorbitant listing fees and basically are creating a culture of huge pre-mines on meme coins that then leads to rugging. Instead, you're just going to have one giant ocean of liquidity and very efficient arbitrage on chain in many different blockchains and many different environments, but there won't be a giant wall between the liquidity pools. And a token like Dog that has a fair launch, that's the number one meme coin on Bitcoin, can launch and have, an even playing field with these tokens that are, basically writing these massive, massive checks to Binance. And I think that is a future where the market is more efficient. The best tokens are the ones that become valuable, instead of whichever kind of corrupt group of people can pay off Binance the most. And Binance, lists a bunch of crap that goes to zero after the bull run.
So are you suggesting that the answer to the centralized exchange problem is essentially, the hopeful soon to be rise of decentralized options, layer twos, et cetera? I mean, is that kind of what you're alluding to? Is it the only way we get out of the centralized exchange kind of, extortion problem is through decentralization? It's technical solutions that lead us to decentralization?
Correct. So people have two approaches to things. You can either have regulators come in and say, hey, you can't charge listing fees. I'm not a fan of having regulators involved in crypto. So my answer is, let's build DEXs and make that experience outcompete the Binance experience. Right. And I think we can do that. I think that's achievable. I think that's a future that is more aligned with Satoshi's kind of FU to the banks, self-custody on chain. I want to build towards that future. I think that's an exciting future. I want Dog to be part of that future. In the meantime, we still have to kind of centralized exchanges still matter, because that future is not here yet. There will be days where Jupiter and Meteor and Uniswap will actually flip Coinbase, for example. The ball is in the court of the DEXs to really step up and improve the user experience and beat out the centralized exchanges. It will take years to do. We need to still play ball with the centralized exchanges, unfortunately, in the meantime, because that's 500 million users that could buy Dog. That would make it very valuable.
Well, that was going to be my next question, is this seems like a very bullish long-term view about decentralized solutions, layer two, scaling solutions, et cetera. But in the meantime, are we dependent on centralized exchanges? Maybe dependent's too strong a word, but sounds like you agree that
Yeah. I mean, look, if Bitcoin didn't have any centralized exchange listings, Bitcoin.
Yeah, where would we be? Really?
Yeah, it would be very, very hard for Bitcoin to have gotten to where it is today without being able to go buy it on a centralized exchange. So they provide an important kind of onboarding mechanism to crypto and to these tokens. And I think, I don't like hate these exchanges. They're just, kind of sociopathic organizations that are just following the incentives of how do we make our shareholders the most money. That's just what it is. I don't think the people inside them are necessarily evil, but yeah, they're not going to fix themselves. And we have to, take a stand. Dog is taking a stand and drawing a line and saying, this is what we believe. And no matter what happens, no matter, how hard it is for us to number go up, these are the lines we're not going to cross. And we're going to see if we can get there without crossing these lines. And if we're able to do it, we've actually changed the entire crypto ecosystem for the better. And that's way more powerful and a way greater legacy to leave than just being another pump and dump.
Oh, I have to say, of all of your experiments, Leo, I think this one's my favorite. So centralized exchanges are, probably pretty important, at least in the short term, for better or for worse, right? For creating liquidity in the system, in this case, in Runes. You also recently made a big announcement. You have a big announcement coming up that you are also in the process of creating cross-chain bridges for DOG. Which I presume is another way to create more liquidity, maybe not for Bitcoin native assets, but for the DOG ecosystem, let's call it. Am I getting that right? Is there anything you want to share about this decision? This was, a little bit of a controversial decision in the Bitcoin ecosystem. And so I'd love to kind of hear how you came to that and how that's sort of been going for you.
The way I view it is, issue your tokens on Bitcoin, trade them anywhere. This is the model that made BTC a $2 trillion asset. So, BTC's existed on Solana and Ethereum for a very long time. It's existed in centralized exchanges. People can choose where they want to buy assets. What's important is that it's always ultimately tied back to an asset that's issued and secured by Bitcoin L1. So I think Solana is a really great DEX. I would not want to issue my coin there. DOG is not moving to Solana. Like, people always like to mischaracterize things. DOG is opening a two-way bridge. It's not a one-way migration bridge. It is a two-way bridge.
How does the bridge work, though? That's my question.
Yeah.
Because you're not burning the Bitcoin token and then putting it on Solana. Is it are you sending it to a multi-sig? Like, how does this bridge work?
Yeah. So there's two fundamental ways that you can build a bridge. You can do a two-way bridge, which is lock the original asset on the main chain, issue a wrapped token, mint a wrapped token on the other chain, or you can do a one-way bridge migration, which burns on one chain and then mints what is now the new actual asset on the other chain, and then you end up with a multi-chain coin where there's like valid tokens on both chains. That's not what we're not doing. That one. We're doing the former. So DOG only ever lives on Bitcoin L1. What sits on Bitcoin L1 and can be verified by Ord, the Runes indexer on Bitcoin L1, that is what DOG is. Okay. So what's technically happening is DOG is being moved into a multi-sig on Bitcoin where it sits there. There are many different companies actually building bridges. What I care about is that they're meeting some level of auditing and trust minimization around their bridge solution. Okay. So it's very, very important that you understand that the risk in this setup is with that entity or group of entities that are signing on that multi-sig. And you got to make sure they wrote code that doesn't have a bug in it, this sort of thing, and that they're not going to
challenges with trust, right? I mean, you're trusting whoever are the signers on this multi-sig to hold your layer one.
Yes. So it's a federated model. So they're they're holding your actual DOG. They're minting a representation of a DOG token on, for example, Solana, which is what's happening now. The DOG token on Solana, because it can always be used you can burn it on Solana, and then as long as you trust those signers on that multi-sig to give you the actual DOG back one for one, what you just burned on Solana, then the Solana token will always equal the same value as DOG on Bitcoin L1 or DOG anywhere else, because you can just quickly move back and forth between them. So you essentially get a representation of DOG trading on Solana. And just to be clear, this is exactly the same way that it works when you use DOG with Gate.io, for example, or any centralized exchange. You are taking, let's just use BTC for example. You're taking your BTC, okay? You're sending it into this basically wallet, private key, threshold signature type situation that Coinbase sets up, which uses like very advanced, kind of never leaking the shards of the private key situation. And then Coinbase, an entity, is custodying that Bitcoin through a private key that they have like distributed and sharded and secure very well. And then they're issuing a representation of that BTC that lives in a MySQL database that Coinbase is running. And that is what you're actually trading, is a token in a database. And then at any time you can withdraw from Coinbase. And what they're going to do is they're going to basically, quote unquote, burn the token in their database and move your BTC from their private kind of holding private key situation to Bitcoin L1 and sending it to whatever address you told them to send it to. It's the exact, literally exact same model, except you're trusting like Coinbase versus you're trusting a bridge. That's the difference.
You're trusting the signers basically of the multi-sig on layer one. You're also trusting, and this is actually, I think, arguably harder to verify. You're also trusting that there's no mismanagement of the peg on the Solana side, right? Or the other chain side, where there's some like paper dog being created that can't actually be backed by the multi-sig, which is a little bit more difficult on other chains. Not impossible, but a little bit more difficult is my understanding. Is that fair to say as well?
So the way there's been issues in the past is, you write a smart contract, and if that smart contract has a bug that allows you to, for example, mint infinite dog tokens or something like this, then you have a huge problem. As long as the smart contract doesn't have a bug, really the trust assumption is just, hey, do I trust the kind of person that's basically the bridge, the people that are in this running this bridge software, which all they're doing is they basically have a single computer that's running Bitcoin with Ord, and they're also running the Solana blockchain. And then they're just comparing the states of them. And then as long as the other signers who are also doing the same thing agree with the state, then it will unlock the Bitcoin or mint the Solana tokens. Issues do happen with smart contracts. This has actually been, I think the majority of bridge hacks in the past have not actually been that, hey, we compromise the private keys of some federated situation, or we like beat your game theory and your distributed system. It's actually just that, like, hey, some engineer some hacker reverse engineered a smart contract, and there was one logical flaw in like one function that they exploited, and then infinitely like created tokens, like you're saying. So that is the main risk.
The bigger vulnerability, arguably, basically on that side.
I would say they're like kind of equal. If you like go to ChatGPT and like ask it, what are the top 10 bridge hacks? And like, I think, you can kind of study these. It's a variety of different things have happened. No big hacks, bridge hacks have happened since 2022. Like, I think the tech and the sort of things have moved forward in that regard. Like, there's more trust around it. It's still not perfect. I think it's the same kind of thing I tell people. It's like, you can, hold your dog in gate.io, and that's fine. You can kind of choose that this is the trade-off that you're going to make. It's better to hold it on Bitcoin L1 in a ledger, right? I think it's always better to hold Bitcoin or dog in a ledger on Bitcoin L1.
But if you need to go fast, right? Like, it's a trade-off, right? I mean, that's essentially.
It's a trade-off to use a custodian or to trade faster. These are decisions everybody has to make. I'm not going to force somebody to do something or not do something. This is a choice that people can choose to make. If they want to buy on a Solana app like Moonshot, they can buy it there. If they want to buy on, Magic Eden or Xverse or Satflow on Bitcoin L1, they can buy it there. This is the approach that Bitcoin has taken. I think it's the right approach to give people choice. And I think we just need to be thoughtful around, hey, like, maybe let's not use this bridge because they didn't audit it. Or this bridge seems to be, more of a legit situation. The people behind it have a good reputation and history, and they audited it. Let's use that one. You still have to make decisions, and let's be conscious and educate ourselves around this. But ultimately, Bitcoin's been doing this for a very long time.
Yeah,
Dog already does it today with centralized exchanges. It's really not a different mental model. Gate can rug you, a bridge can rug you.
It's basically just wrapped Bitcoin, right? I mean, it is interesting right? Because there was some controversy around this, right? Like you're abandoning Bitcoin and you're going to Solana. But actually, as you're describing it, I'm like, oh, this is just wrapped Bitcoin, which arguably, again, and there will be many a maxi who disagrees with this, but arguably that is good for Bitcoin, right? Like it creates liquidity, it creates demand for Bitcoin, like inarguably, right? Wrapped Bitcoin is probably positive for a number.
I would agree. I think the vast majority of the world would agree. I think there are some Bitcoin maxis who would prefer Bitcoin to have, you know, a $10 billion market cap and like everybody is forced to use Sparrow and it's like this little, you know, utopian cult. But if you want Bitcoin to become the world reserve currency, yeah, that's not going to work.
The majority of Bitcoiners would probably agree that wrapped Bitcoin is not like a big detriment to Bitcoin itself, right? Like wrapped Bitcoin, you know, is creating liquidity. It's creating demand for Bitcoin. Its number go up for Bitcoin. And that's essentially what you're doing. You're creating wrapped dog, essentially. You're enabling people to trade wrapped dog on other chains, which honestly, good for you. I don't know any other Bitcoin native assets that have done that. Am I right? I can't think of any.
So Pops and Billy actually both have migrated to Solana in the past. So there's, you know, Bitcoin is obviously the largest example. Like there's WBTC, CBTC, quite a few bridges and situations there. But no, I mean, we've got a few runes that have precedent for this, and like huge shout out, Farmer Joe's kind of been a early.
That's right.
Farmer Joe's been like an early advocate of this model and kind of sees he's like skating to where the puck's going and kind of sees this pretty well and is pretty involved in the DeFi stuff. So it's not like this is a completely revolutionary idea or something.
Is the Solana bridge what's launching tomorrow or yesterday, depending on when this is being launched? And how many other chains are you developing bridges for?
So just to be clear, I'm not developing any bridges.
There
are a bunch of independently funded startups, you know, mostly VC funded startups that want to scale Bitcoin and
want to scale Bitcoin native assets specifically.
Yes, want to scale Bitcoin tokens to L2s, to other blockchains, and you know, hopefully in time we can maybe have an upgrade to Bitcoin that allows for trustless bridging and better security and trust minimization and stuff. But today, like, people are doing the best with what they have. They're trying to basically create systems so that you can safely bridge these tokens. There's a handful of startups doing this. I'm in conversations with all of them. Dog is making this big move to Solana. Move to Solana is not the right term. Dog is becoming tradable on Solana, and you can bridge it to Solana. And that is what's happening, or would have happened yesterday if you're listening to this today. And like that's the focus. We are doing what we're calling an invasion of Solana. So for the entire week, we're fully focused on getting listings on a lot of these DEXs on Solana, which really just means you're verified. So it's like, hey, like this is the official dog. You're not going to get scammed buying a fake dog. We got to get, you know, verifications. We got to make some noise. I want this to be a big event in Solana. And I want people in Solana to be able to hear about dog and be educated about dog and know that they have the option to buy dog now. So we're going to do that to many different chains, many different L2s over the coming weeks. I think, you know, Solana is probably the most exciting one just because that's where there's a lot of attention. This unlocks dog on apps that have, you know, many tens of millions of users on the App Store. These people are going to be able to hear, hey, like there's a meme going on Bitcoin called dog on TikTok, and then they're actually going to be able to buy it, which hasn't really been a thing in the past, right? So we are going to be expanding into basically every blockchain, big blockchain. There are bridges and efforts being made to, you know, bridge dog and allow people to deposit and withdraw and trade on many blockchains.
A particular VC that you can name that's driving this? Like who's spearheading this effort if it's not you?
So I actually don't know the specific VCs that are funding these companies, but I would say like this was always like this is not something that started last week. You know, there's been companies building like
and there's multiple companies. What you're telling
many companies funded with many millions of dollars, legit startups working on this. You know, very smart people behind the scenes. Some of the honestly, I would consider, you know, most technically sophisticated people in crypto. Actually, there's a few of them working on.
Any names you can give us?
So. I don't. So a lot of these companies have not announced their bridges yet. So it's unrevealed and it's obviously not my place to share that. But I want dog to be on Solana. I want dog to be on all of the Bitcoin L2s. You know, dog coming to Hyperliquid would be super, super exciting, right? there's definitely, I think like Ethereum is another big one, which Dog will definitely, have a bridge to. So Cardano, there's a company that's already bridged 20 million Dog to Cardano, for example. Like there's a lot of these different companies doing this. And I'm going to specifically just try to support them in the best way that I can, as long as they're meeting some sort of like threshold of, hey, like your bridge is audited, share the audit with me. What's the multi-sig situation? How long has this been running? This sort of stuff.
Makes sense.
That's important to me. But other than that, it's like, I want to support everyone. We're not here to just like, pick winners or this sort of thing. I want these startups to hopefully work together, build standards around this. But yeah, I don't want to, I would say like 3 of them have not done any sort of public situation. And yeah, I don't want to like share anything right now.
Fair enough. No, I think this is very bullish. I was prepared to be critical, but I think this is super bullish, honestly, for Dog. Okay, cool. Fire round. I cannot believe how long we've been going, but this has been like a super fun conversation. So thank you, Leo, for hanging on with me. Real quickly, I do want to kind of like wrap up this interview by sort of just asking like your broad market view for, Bitcoin native assets going forward, what you're feeling like your message is to the community, how we sort of get ourselves out of this funk that we've been in, how do we turn the ship around, so to speak. But before I do, I want to ask specifically about Ordinals, because the other controversial thing that sort of come up in the Leonidas world is that you recently sold a sub 100 ordinal. I think it was ordinal number 53, if I'm not mistaken. You were like chiming the bells on sub 100s back in the day. I remember you fighting with Casey, being like, we need inscription numbers. There's so much value in inscription numbers. Are you still bullish on low inscription numbers? I have to ask, basically, what's up with selling number 53?
Yeah, no, look, it's a great question. So the answer is like, yes, I am still incredibly bullish on low inscription numbers. I still hold a ton of the low inscription numbers. There's sub 100, sub 1,000, sub 10,000. I still believe in the sub 100,000 thesis. That has not changed at all. What has changed a little bit is, hey, I'm 28 years old. I want to have a little bit more liquidity and not have 100% of my net worth tied up in JPEGs. That's what's changed. I think that's fairly reasonable. Hopefully people understand that. But yeah, that's pretty much the situation. So rebalancing portfolio type situation to not be literally 100% in JPEGs.
Fair enough. Were you previously basically 100% in JPEGs?
Yeah, I don't like
you were overweighted. Honestly, to be fair, I think many of us are experiencing that in like some way, shape, or form in the past 10 months. Like maybe we went a little too hard in the JPEG paint lately. Like I know I felt that, so I get it. But yeah, is that just the long and the short?
So just rolling the clock back here a little bit, had a lot of success in Ethereum with NFTs and literally 100% in NFTs. And then, people can, say whatever they want. I hold all my bags all the way down during FTX, during everything, from what was a pretty high number to a pretty low number. And like, that was the reality of like that crash of 2021. And I still hold the vast majority of those NFTs today. And yeah, I'm just doing some basic rebalancing of the portfolio to just have some liquidity because, I want to be able to buy things as well. I want to be able to do things, other than just hold NFTs and crypto. And, this is not to like, it's not like I'm buying a house or anything like that. This is literally just me saying, hey, I want to have some more dry powder to do different things in crypto other than just hold JPEGs. And yeah, people look, everything I ever do gets criticized and people have takes on it. And it's like, that's okay. I'm used to that. That's totally fine.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, well, so then I guess we'll wrap up. We are almost at 2 hours. This would be a perfect little like couple-minute wrap up. What is your message to the Ordinal / Bitcoin native assets ecosystem broadly? Like, what do you want people to really think about or take away from this in terms of, maybe how we get out of this, again, the sort of downward trend that we're in? Is it just a matter of like, hang in there? You know, do you think that there's something we need to do as a community to sort of turn the ship around? Is it just a matter of UX? Like, what are the most important things that you want the ecosystem to internalize from this chat? Or maybe that we haven't mentioned that yet.
Yeah, so my message to builders is keep building. You're doing great, actually. There's lots of really quality improvements that I see every month. So just keep building. Do not give up on this ecosystem. You know, tokens on Bitcoin is a huge opportunity. I think it's going to really pay off building here. My message to Degens would be just keep showing up every day, working for your bags. You know, if you are the kind of person who just wants to, you know, float around from week to week, whatever the attention is on, this is probably not the place for you. You know, we are more of the kind of more like a Bitcoin maxi than we are, hey, just like floating around trading different things. So if you are able to basically have this thesis with a bunch of us that tokens and NFTs on Bitcoin, and basically building this economy on top of Bitcoin is a very bright vision and future, and that we can take the properties that make BTC valuable and have different assets other than BTC and inherit those properties, and that, you know, appeals to you, stick around. There's a lot of exciting things coming in the future. This space will continue to evolve. Bitcoin will continue to grow, I believe. And I think it's going to be very, very exciting. And yeah, like just like when ordinals were dead 2 times in the past, you know, it's like darkest before the light, right? It's like I could very easily see a world where just altcoins and NFTs kind of across all chains have a bounce back pretty soon here at some point. I do believe we're in a crypto bull run. Hang in for that moment. I think we're going to go for a wild ride again. So that would be my message to those 2 groups. My message to artists would be incredible time to inscribe your art into Bitcoin. My message to VCs would be keep investing in people here, keep investing into companies here. I think there's a lot of very, very low-hanging fruit opportunities that we can continue to, you know, grind away at and ultimately create a huge on-chain economy on top of Bitcoin here. And, you know, I do think it's important to fund builders and not just have builders kind of launch ICOs themselves. I don't believe in that model quite as much. So
awesome. Thank you, Leo. That was awesome. Thank you.